Nigeria is already in her 54th year as an independent nation and has been involved in all types of government and leadership. Being a milestone in the life of a country, a review of a foreign policy within the period is germane. Since independence, the country has been confronted by governance challenges as it oscillated between civilian and military rule. So I asked my guest, the Professor of International Law, Professor Udombana, whether our foreign policy has been consistent owing to the different challenges we have faced, and for the past 54 years, where we are as regards our foreign policy. And this is what he had to say.
In the 70s and 80s, in fact, from 60s, 70s, and 80s, the focus was on decolonization of Africa and the end of apartheid in South Africa. And so the focus of Nigeria's foreign policy was Afrocentric in nature. And whether it was civilian regime or military regime, I think that was the main focus, because a number of African countries were still not yet independent, and then coupled with the apartheid policies in South Africa. So Nigeria made decolonization, just like a few other African countries, the centerpiece of their foreign policy.
Since the objectives of our foreign policy has to do with the international cooperation and territorial integrity, we have done well.
Yes, we've largely done well in terms of our obligations to our international bodies, to which Nigeria is a party, in terms of respect for international law. If I give you just a recent example, the Cameroon-Nigeria issue, before the International Court of Justice, that is over Bakassi and some parts of Chad. The judgment was not in favor of Nigeria, but all the same, we obeyed that judgment. There was a bilateral agreement after that judgment between Cameroon and Nigeria, which we call the Green Tree Agreement, which eventually led to the gradual implementation of that judgment. Nigeria has respected that judgment, even though a number of issues still are still not yet addressed. But largely, I think we have kept to our international obligations. Also, in terms of our financial obligation to international organizations, Nigeria is a member of the United Nations, a member of the Organization of African Unity, which is now the African Union. It's a member of the ECOWAS, it's a member of Commonwealth, it's a member of the Non-Aligned Movement, just to mention a few of them. And I think Nigeria has played leadership role in almost all of them. Meka Anyaku was the Secretary General of the Commonwealth for several years. And Nigerian Professor Gambari has also played leadership role in the United Nations and several others as well. So I think Nigeria has done very well in that regard.
Nigeria is 54. Now, what progress can you say Nigeria has made so far in our foreign policy?
There's a disconnect between our domestic policy and our foreign policy. We spend a lot of energy, both in terms of human and material, in trying to promote Nigeria's foreign policy, but it has not really brought down into domestic economic development, which is essentially what is all supposed to boil down to. Charity should begin at home. Yes. But you see, foreign policy is also a function of your military might, your economic might, and a number of other factors. So if we don't address those factors, then whatever we are doing outside will not come back in terms of positive impact.
Yeah, because it's just a reflection of our domestic policy.
That's correct.
Right. So I would say, what exactly is our foreign policy?
As captured in Section 19 of the Constitution, which is promotion and protection of Nigeria's national interests. Essentially, foreign policy is based on your national interests. Whatever you do outside, whether at bilateral level or multilateral level, is to promote your foreign national interest. And that could be economic, it could be cultural, it could be military in nature, it could be whatever you may think of. My take on this is that Nigeria has not been fared too well in terms of bringing the result of our foreign policy effort at the domestic level. Let me give you an example. Nigeria fought for the apartheid regime in South Africa, both human and material. In fact, Nigeria made itself one of the frontline states, even though we do not share boundaries with South Africa. You will also notice that after Nelson Mandela was released in the early 90s, one of the countries he visited was Nigeria, just to show gratitude. But after apartheid ended and South Africa opened up, what do we gain as a result of it? Literally nothing. Rather, it is the reverse. South Africa has invaded Nigeria with MTN, with ShopRite and several other companies that have come into Nigeria, and they are benefiting largely from it. But because we do not have the manufacturing sector, we do not have a growing economy that we can actually export to other countries, we are not making the best use of that opening. And we have done the same thing in terms of Chad in the 70s, peacekeeping operations in the 70s in Chad. We've done the same thing for Sierra Leone and Liberia in the 90s. We've done the same thing even in Mali here. We've participated in a number of peacekeeping operations in terms of helping for peacemaking and peacekeeping in other countries. But when they open up, when there's peace eventually, when there's a transition to democracy, eventually we find out that we are just empty. We are not able to even key into it.
So would you say that our foreign policy is respected by other countries?
To some extent, they are respected, but we are not benefiting maximally the way we should. I believe that other countries appreciate Nigeria. Take ECOWAS, for example. It was Nigeria and Togo that joined together in 1975 to form the Economic Community of West African States. And as a result of that, today we are speaking of free movement of persons, free movement of goods in ECOWAS sub-region. But you see, that is also, to bring the benefit home is, like I said earlier on, is a factor of domestic policies and the infrastructural development that is in place. So you find out that other ECOWAS citizens are flocking Nigeria and they are maybe participating in employment and all of that, but what are Nigerians getting as a result of it? Many Nigerians are helping in a number of other West African countries, particularly, for example, the Gambia. Much of the civil service in Gambia were paid by Nigerian government, up to this moment. But you see the way they treat Nigerians, even in Gambia, as if we are supporters. So unless we tie up our domestic policy with our foreign policy and bring it to the promotion of economic development and the enhancement of the well-being of Nigerians, then there's a disconnect somehow and we will not benefit effectively out of it.
Now, like you said earlier, that Nigerians' foreign policy is Afrocentric.
Yes.
Now, do you think that it is still like that presently?
No, it can't be, because the world has changed. Right now, we are no longer talking about decolonization because that is over. Right now, we are no longer talking about apartheid because apartheid is over. So, and then we are now in a world of globalization, where there is opening up of boundaries and all that, and there is free movement of persons and goods almost everywhere. So our policy has to also change. But what must remain constant is Nigeria's national interest at any point in time. Nigeria cannot be involved in virtually everything out there. We have to cut our coat according to our size. And we must be able to get into areas where we think we'll benefit from it in terms of economic development. China is invading almost all countries in the world, including Nigeria. But what are we getting in return for it? That's just a problem, because our infrastructures have not fully developed. Our industries, many of them have collapsed, and we are not getting new ones on board. Technologically, we are not there yet. In terms of the military, because if you don't have the military power, you cannot really back. You need that for a nuisance value. Nigeria wants to be a permanent member of the Security Council. Currently, it's still a member of the Security Council. In the last 5 years, Nigeria has been elected twice as a non-permanent member of the Security Council.
Yeah,
but how can you be talking of being a permanent member of the Security Council when you cannot fight an insurgency just in one state in the country, within the country? So you need military might, you need economic might to be able to create a nuisance value outside the country.
So in the past 54 years, looking back then and right now, where are we in our foreign policy?
I think it's mixed. I think I would rather say that the 70s and the 80s were the golden era in Nigeria's foreign policy. I guess given the opportunities to fight for decolonization and the end of apartheid. But I think starting from the 90s and this century, I think it has been a decline in terms of foreign policy, especially in the last 4 years or so. Because of insurgency in Nigeria, it seems to have been a distraction. And so we are not really making our voice known in the international community. We still participate in a number of activities here and there. We are still members of the United Nations, the African Union, and a number of Nigerians are still active in the international scene. But Nigeria is not receiving the kind of respect that is due to Nigeria, given the massive resources that we have put out there. And I think part of the reason is that we have been distracted by this problem of insurgency. And I don't think it's because of lack of manpower. If you look at what the country has recently done with regard to the response to Ebola, and we need to commend this government for it. But I think we can also carry that beyond these shores and make sure that the outcome of it also benefits Nigeria in return.
So you wouldn't say, where are we headed?
I think we've been shifting between Afrocentrism, economic diplomacy, and all whatnot. But I think we should come back to economic diplomacy. In other words, our focus on foreign policy in a globalized world should be to help in sustainable economic development. Both whether in a bilateral relation with other countries, whether you are talking of Russia, you are talking of United States, you are talking of Britain, talking of Canada, or even within the West African zone, the goal should be to bring foreign investors, for example, to open up the Nigerian space and create interest in Nigeria. Tourism, for example, can be an instrument of foreign policy. Nigeria has a movie industry, music industry, but I don't know what we cannot say tangibly what Nigeria is benefiting out of it. It can be used in laundering Nigeria's image, for example. You know, and so I think we need to do a lot more in terms of focusing on Nigeria's national interest, particularly economic development in our foreign policy, whether it's bilateral or multilateral in nature.
Now, if you were speaking to the foreign minister, Nigeria's foreign minister, what would you tell him?
I would say that we need to draw a think tank that will revisit the issues Nigeria's foreign policy. And that is one of the reasons why the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs was created. I don't know, there appears to be a disconnect between the two institutions, Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, which was set up as a think tank to continuously, you know, rework on Nigeria's foreign policy and the goals and the purpose and the direction it should be going. So I would think that there should be a reworking along that line. There should be a think tank that should be set up. And I think the National Conference did something along that line. There were a lot of suggestions in a number of areas in where Nigeria can bring energy back into its foreign policy relations to achieve the purpose of national development. So I think my advice to the foreign minister would be to set up a think tank. We have had eminent personalities in the past, and then let's have a new direction as to where we should be going in this global century.
Now, I would like you to take a listen to the foreign minister.
In international relations or in diplomacy, our national interest is paramount. All right? I don't care what anybody may say. Nigeria's interest is first and foremost the concern of my concern and the concern of the Nigerian government. And whatever is the interest of Nigeria is the welfare and the protection of the Nigerians and the Nigerian national interest and its territorial integrity. So whoever is going to give us that support will certainly foster strong relationship. Now, after all, I mean, the Americans, the Europeans, the EU, the Japanese, Chinese, they're all giving us support, and we endeavor to strengthen that support. At the same time, any country, because Nigeria has always maintained a neutral position in its own foreign policy. It deals with almost every part of the world. So we are not going to exclude any part of the world in fostering our relations, because whichever country we have relations with, there are certain benefits that will come to us as far as our national interest is concerned.
Tell me, what do you think our relationship with Russia should be, since we have a cordial relationship with the United States? Now, do we have any foreign policy as regards to that?
Well, our foreign policy with Russia should not be different from the foreign policy we have with other countries, including the United States. And that is Nigeria's national interest at any point in time. Like I said earlier on, Nigeria was and still part of the non-aligned movement. Whatever problem that might be coming up between Russia and the United States may be an extension of the Cold War politics. Even though Cold War is over, but there seems to be a renewal of the kind of tension that existed during the Cold War. And Nigeria should not get into the fray. We should promote whatever would advance the national interest of the country. If we have bilateral relations with Russia, I think we should promote it for the purpose of the mutual well-being of both countries. But of course, when we are at the multilateral level, speaking at the United Nations, where Russia is also a part, we should seek to promote international law. But when we are speaking at the bilateral level, I don't think we should allow the relations, the co-relation between United States and Russia to also affect Nigeria as a reason of it. We should just stay neutral.
But And that's Diplomatic Channel for this week. You can send in your questions and comments via email or any of our social media platforms. The addresses are on your screen. I'm Victoria Ido. Thank you for staying with us.